Hey, good morning. It's lovely to see you all. What's happening? Excellent, excellent. I'm hearing all good things, at least from the silence that is coming my way. I'm translating it into all happiness and flowers and whatnot. So wasn't this what 7, 8, and 9? Wasn't that exciting? I kind of like 7, 8, and 9. I don't know about the rest of you, but mostly 7, because we finally got to remember I told you that the um, graphs in some of the book written by one of our own agents. Well, we got there, like pages 146 and 147. Those were Doug Holliday's graphs that he sent to Gary, that Gary then said, wow, these are good. Let's incorporate them into the book and use them as a pricing conversation. So
I'll tell
little
you, listening to this made me want to be an agent. It made it sound fun.
right. And that's an important piece, I think, Tammy, is to remember that even with challenges in the market, that if you are interested in winning, and if you are interested in strategy, and if you are interested in the idea of figuring it out, right, especially tactic 7, the whole pricing strategy conversation, that's what it is. It's about figuring it out. So you just gotta figure it out.
A lot of people think that all agents really do is open doors. And, I always tell people, I'm like, look, anybody can find a house nowadays. You go on Realtor, you hit all the red pins along the spots you want to live, and you can look. But the agents earn their stripes when it comes to the negotiating and the strategy. And I know that, but to actually read it and see what you guys have to do is, that's why I got in the mortgage business, because I like the strategy and the numbers. But you guys have just as much of that as we do, probably more in some cases.
Yeah, sure. And the reality is that some agents do just open doors, right? You have to choose which you're going to be. Are you the local economist of choice? Do you know enough? Would you pass that test? Like if there was a license that was given for a local economist of choice, would you pass the test to get that license? That would be the question that I would ask myself. And do you believe that your knowledge of market conditions is your value proposition? Because that's what sets us apart, right? Everybody has marketing, like it's called the internet. Like we each on it every single day, 100 times a day. And the reality is that 90% of marketing is what? Price. Hello, this thing on, test, 1, 2, test. Right, 90% of marketing is price. And so when you know that 90% of marketing is price, it just underlines for me all over again that being an expert in market conditions, being an expert in strategic conversation around what those market conditions mean and how they affect people's ability to find a buyer, or I should say find the best buyer in the time frame that suits them, that has everything to do with you being the local economist of choice. So let's start in tactic 7, because 7 to me is kind of the crux of it. It's besides tactics 4 and 5, which is find the motivated and convert. Tactic 7 in terms of the pricing and numbers, probably the most important piece of the book. So what were your takeaways?
I thought it was one thing that I thought was, again, something that you usually already know, but when it's characterized a specific way was very helpful. It was on page 140, what makes a property comparable? 4 main factors: location, size, amenities, and condition. It's nice to be able to sort of, I think when I'm dealing with sellers, they think that our job as realtors, or my job as realtors, is to sell the place, just do your work, do your magic, and yet what I'm finding out, the hard way most of the time is that think I'm starting to think that my job is to the best of my ability, systematize this process to reduce the number of preventable surprises. And this is an example of it. You know, here's what people respond to. Here's specifically the system that I've found is how buyers evaluate a property and decide whether they're going to buy it in any market. And especially in this market where, okay, you can say all you want, it's a crazy market, there's low inventory. Buyers are informed, and this is how they evaluate and qualify. I thought that was really good.
Yeah. Yeah. And to Tony's point, you know, my script for this with sellers was always, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I appreciate the fact that that this seems more subjective to you, or perhaps there's a desire for it to be more subjective to you. The process of getting your home in front of the most number of buyers, most number of qualified buyers, and finding the best buyer to actually purchase it is actually a very objective one. It's like, it's not about go and sell my house. No, it's not that's not how this works, right? It's not how it works. It's a simple objective process. And here's the process that we go through. Boom, ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. House hits market. People come, they either buy it or they don't. Again, it's an objective process. No one, just like no one can make you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, sell your house for more or less than you believe you want to. No one can make a buyer pay more or less than what they choose, right? It's why you have to, everything's an objective process. The buyers go through an objective process as well. And the best transactions are a blend of those two objective processes, whatever, coming together.
So I'm going to challenge you a bit on that, because one of the things that brought me to this line of work is I sincerely believe that the purchase and sale of a home is the most emotional sale on the planet. It's this huge deal. And I think that sellers, when they come to me and ask me to help them, are hoping that I, work people's emotions to leverage the price. How do you respond to that in the context of understanding that I'm starting to realize that this is a systematic process? I mean, how do the emotions play in?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And so how I would answer that is with a bold law, right? And the bold law, I would answer it with, who knows the bold law I'm going to quote? Anybody want to take a crack at it? It's logic makes them think, emotion makes them act, right? So that's not to say that emotion is not a piece of the puzzle. However, one can't begin and end with emotion. This is not all about emotion. The foundation is logic. The foundation is objective. We have to have a logically objective foundation for people to understand and feel good about. And then the emotion will kick in to actually make them act. If it's all about just logic, then people understand it, but they don't act. So the emotion comes into play where, people are going to love it. They are going to want to live there. They are going to want to, but that doesn't necessarily trump the foundational logic portion of it, right? And I think sellers sometimes mistake the fact that, okay, so my house is worth $750,000, and so but someone who falls in love with it is going to pay me $825,000 because of all the emotion attached to it. And that's not the way it works, because people balance both. People need both to make decisions. And what sellers are saying when they say things like what Tony just said is the mistake that it's all about emotion. It's not. Logic makes them think, and that's where it all starts. Emotion makes them act. You need both to start the fire. But if you have a match and you're just walking around with a match and the match is the emotion, and you have no wood to light on fire, well, then you're just going to burn your fingers at some point, because the match is going to burn down and you're going to have an alley, right?
I'm really glad I asked that question, because it helped me, because what I think I heard from you is that yes, it is the most emotional sale on the planet, but when all is said and done, people end up looking at their wallet. And there may have been a time before we had access to all this information that people may have, I don't know, may have made more capricious decisions based on emotion. But because we have access to such information, that doesn't happen much anymore.
No, I got to tell you, it's interesting what you're saying, because a couple of years ago, probably like 4 or 5 years ago now, my mother-in-law sold her house in Trumbull, and we were looking for a smaller house to replace it. And all the houses, she was like, that's disgusting. I could never live there, like super, super picky. So then my husband finally said to her, Mom, how do you think your house compares? Just to set the table for that. The house hadn't been renovated since the 80s. And my mother-in-law thought it was the greatest palace in the world. What are you talking about? It's Trumbull. Like, of course. So, 5 years ago, my mother-in-law thought that house would have sold for $500,000. Like, this is worth a $500,000 house. We're like, Mom, it doesn't have a master bathroom. There's no way to make a master bathroom. The kitchen is small. The dining room, nobody uses dining rooms. There's too many walls, like all these things. And we would take her and show her $500,000 houses. And it was interesting. Like, she just never could get past that. It took 3 realtors to sell the house, and they were always chasing the market because they could never get past the emotional part of it.
So it's a balancing act, right? It's a balancing act. And here's the tricky part. If you are a less emotional, more objective, behavioral style, if you're a D or a C, the objective is easier for you. You have to remember that there is some emotion that has to come into play to seal the deal. If you're more of a relationship-based person, if you're more of an emotional behavioral style, the I or the S, you have to remember that it's not all about feelings, right? You've got to base it in some grounded reality. You've got to have facts and then put feelings on top of it. It's a challenge for all of us, depending on where we are heavier. You have to remember it's those 2 pieces.
Did you already cover how to handle this if you're a D, or did I miss that?
So how to handle what exactly?
What you just talked about, managing this process as a D versus an I or an S.
Yeah, so the high Ds have to remember that they're actually talking to humans, and and that humans naturally have some version of emotion, and to the way I used to do it is take pauses. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I used to purposely make myself pause and ask some questions so that I could balance out the objective factness of it with the emotional side of it. And so I would rely on the client to bring the emotional side of it, and then I would work with what they brought me, right? And if I had a high D or a high C client, then I would have to generate. At some point, I might have to ask the question. So I'm curious, Tony, how does all that feel? Right, because by me asking the question, it brings someone who's not naturally prone to emotion, who's more based in logic, to because again, logic makes them think, emotion makes them act. If you're not bringing both to the table, it's a non-starter. So sometimes you have to generate the question that allows them to say, yeah, it feels good.
Awesome.
Or it doesn't, and then you follow up with the question, what doesn't feel good about it? Is there something that we missed? Is there something that we should go over again? Talk to me about what's, where the concern is, what the conflict is, right? So it's all about the consult. What else? Staying in tactic 7 for a little while longer. What else did you see?
Since nobody else is speaking up, I have to say that I was thoroughly confused at the top of page. I'm easily confused, by the way, in case you're not sure. The top of page 43, Before a seller chooses a strategy, they must make a very important position. Do they want to sell for the maximum price now, or do they want to maximize the price possible? Huh?
Yeah. So I'll give you an example of that.
Yeah.
In probably 1999 or maybe 2000, I had a listing on Eden Hill Road. It was a builder that my very first assistant brought to the table. And the idea of story went right in and out of my head. So I had this listing right on Eden Hill Road, and it was priced at $949, and the builder was so attached to that $949 number. This question became absolutely the question that we needed to answer. Are you interested in selling for the maximum price now, which was not $949? Because when I had it listed at $949, no one was willing to pay that. Or are you willing to allow time to bring you the maximum price possible? Did they get $949 for that house? Yes, they did. 3 years later, 3 years and 7 real estate agents later, I was the third one in. There were 4 more after me. There were a total of 8. Total of, I forget if it was 7 or not. I was in the middle. I was number 3. They had 4 more after me. And 3 more years, which meant the entire marketing period was 3.5 years. So they got to be right, by golly. They got their $949, but it took them 3.5 years to get it. Does that make sense, Tony? Does that help explain that?
It does now. Yeah. Thanks.
That's exactly what happened to my mother-in-law. It took 3 agents. They wanted 425. It took 3 agents and a year sitting on the market, one showing like every 6 weeks. And somebody from New York bought it just as the market was just like 3 years ago.
Yeah. So it's a matter of, had they answered the question differently, Tony, had they said, we want to sell for the maximum price right now, they were probably looking at something in the mid to high 8s, right? They could have received and sold the house for $875 pretty quickly right then and there. Instead, they decided to wait an additional 3 years and torture 4 or 5 other real estate agents after they tortured me. And again, they got to be right. And for some people, being right is everything, right? And I'm certain if we were to ask them today, their version of that story is, yeah, see, all those real estate agents, they just tried to get us to undersell that whole property. And see, we showed them, we knew it was worth $949. Well, okay, right?
Yeah.
Whatever.
I wonder how much they paid in mortgage over the next couple of years.
Well, sure, mortgage, carrying costs, it was a new construction, so no one was even living there. They had to start paying on the loan because at some point as a builder, you can't not pay the funds that you use to build the house. So it was all just such silliness. And yet that story hopefully explains that answer, right? The people have to recognize that if you've chosen to be a seller right now, well, then you need to behave like a seller right now. You don't get to be a seller right now and choose to be a seller 3 years from now. Well, just be a seller 3 years from now if that's the case.
I guess the only part of this, and I'll shut up after this, the only part of this that was confusing to me is that this is in the context of a market that, this was written in the context of a market that was shifting down. And I kind of went back in time to, those days, if you want to maximize the price possible, well, if the prices are going down, the best price possible is now, but we're not there right now. So it's all.
Well, and think about it this way. You could be having that there are conversations that I personally had in 2007 and 2008, 2009 with people who were looking to be sellers, who had to wait until last year for the maximum price possible version to show back up. So even if the market is in decline, you still have a decision to make. Are you going to sell it now for what it's worth today, or are you going to wait for the best number possible? Well, that in some people's cases, that took 13 years for the best price possible to show up. So it can be in a declining market, even declining market conversation makes that question even more relevant, right? Because you may have to wait way longer rather than 3 years or a year for Tammy's mother-in-law, right? You may have to wait a decade. Yikes. What else? Anybody have any comments about pricing ahead of the market? It's really page 147. It's all those graphs. What were your ahas around that? I'm hoping some, because that's probably a lesson that each of us needs to be reminded about over and over and over and over and over again.
Is this the part where you price it low and hope to drive up the price? Is that what pricing the market means? If that's what this is, I think that's genius. I don't know why more people don't do that.
Yeah, and I think that the best case scenario, Tammy, is pricing ahead of the market. I'm going to refrain from using the word low, only because I think it's a trap if you use that word with sellers, right? But pricing ahead of the market, if the market is in decline, and if you look at that graph, right, if you're always on top of that trend line, well, then you're always behind. Because remember we used a couple of weeks ago the analogy of the plane taking off. And so the plane takes off, it's on the runway, and then just as it starts to get lift, you take a snapshot that's that moment in time. There's a sale. So there's a comparable sale right there. And then the plane gets lift and it just keeps going like this. And so a short period of time later, you take another snapshot in time. Well, the plane is here all of a sudden. But the sale you're looking at, the snapshot in time is here. Life is different in an appreciating market. In a depreciating market, the same exact analogy works. However, it's with a landing plane, right? So the plane coming in for a landing, you take a snapshot right here. My shoulders don't work well enough for me to do this. You take a snapshot right here where the plane is landing. Well, there's the comp. Okay, well, but then the market is still declining. And so by the time the plane lands, very quickly afterwards, you take another snapshot, the plane is already here. And so now you have this differential. So the comps that you're using to position and price your property seem like they're higher, except you have to recognize the market is in decline and jump ahead of that trend line. So you have to be here looking at where the market's going to be here, and be brave enough to recognize that if you're one of the only ones who does that, it looks like a bargain, and then you may create competition and drive multiple offers even in a declining market. Does that help, Tammy?
So are you saying come down a little bit from that hill?
I'm saying know what the trends are, know where things are and where they may be going, even if it's a bit of a guess. And in a declining market, price ahead of the downward curve. If we're losing, I don't know, 1% every couple of weeks, right? We're not presently, just by the way. But if you're losing 1%, if the trend line is, every 2 weeks we're worth 1% less, well, you need to put your house on the market 3 or 4, maybe 5% below where the comps were, because the comps are all here, where the plane was at 10,000 feet. You're putting the house on the market when it's on the tarmac.
Oh, it seems harder to price it like that. It seems harder to price it in a downward market than it is in an upward market.
Well, because when in an upward market, you have, from a seller's perspective, you have appreciation as a cushion, right? In a downward market, the seller is concerned that there is no appreciation, and so there's depreciation, and so the seller feels like they're giving away the cushion. That's why it's a much more difficult conversation for sellers to understand and say, oh yeah, that sounds great. The last 3 homes sold for, 500, let's price it at 475. And yet that's exactly what is required in order to get ahead of that curve line and be the next house to sell. Yes, Sylvan.
So thank you. For me, it has never been hard to price it anyway, because I'm not the one pricing it. I'm giving them the opportunity to choose from two different strategies, and I show them the results from one strategy versus the results from another strategy, and I give it up to them to choose. And then, I mean, if they're smart enough, they're going to choose the one that is ahead of the market. And this is how I actually measure their motivation.
Right.
When
Well,
I
and,
ask, yeah,
and remember that the and I couldn't agree with that more. However, in a really declining situation, that some of these graphs show, them making the wrong choice, to me, it counts me out. Right. So, so you're going with choice A.
exactly.
Great. Let me give you the number of one of my competitors who I, have a bone to pick with, because I'd rather they struggle with you for the next couple of months. And when it doesn't sell and expires, then give me a shout back, right? Because then when you're willing to get serious, right? And we don't do that because we don't lead generate enough to have more opportunities than we know what to do with, right? If we lead generated enough to have more opportunities than we knew what to do with, it would be easier to step away from those opportunities where, the result is the same. You'll have an unsold home, right? The difference is that you'll just have a bloody forehead from beating your head against the wall for however many months you choose to be in business with that person versus not. But to me, tactic number 7 goes back to the concept and the idea that there is just one thing that gets a home sold, and it's positioning it properly in the market. And if you do that well, almost nothing else matters. If you don't do that well, and what's interesting to me is that in my experience, agents who don't do that well decide that it's everything else that matters. Right. And what I mean by that, again, I was an expired guy in my day. And so I took over a lot of properties from other real estate agents. And to me, the conversation with the seller was just one thing. It's like, well, what are you going to do differently? Well, maybe nothing except guide you towards a better decision on the positioning of your property. This isn't about, the bigger banners and the fancier ads. Oh, I write ad copy much better than my competitors. Nope. It's not about that. It's not about the website. It's not about the pictures. It's not about the brochures. If you really want to talk about what gets home sold, it's the positioning in the property. Tony.
So a part of me hates to ask this question, but I want to hear your answer to it because I'm sure you have answered it. So if price is all that matters, then what do sellers need us for?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I appreciate that, Tony, because it sounds to me like in your mind, kind of all agents are kind of the same, right? And our job is to market the property and bring you a buyer. Is that kind of where you're at?
Yeah, I mean, you're the one who said price is the one thing. So, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So here's a secret, Tony, that I'm willing to certainly share with you, that you may not hear from anybody else. And the little secret in real estate is that we all do about the same stuff, right? And so and to the point that if you're looking for marketing, or you're looking for pretty flyers or the photos or any of those things that are the prep work to get your property on the market, I can give you the contacts that we use. You could do that on your own, right? There is no reason necessarily to pay us. We probably have a wider grab of it from an exposure perspective to reach more buyers than you would on your own. However, the reason you hire me is because I bring an expertise in market conditions to the table. Our discussion about the positioning of your property that will get you the most competition and get you that best buyer is more important than nearly anything else that we can discuss. And after that, my expertise from when the buyer shows up and the 79 different things that have to happen to actually get you to a closing table, that's why you need me. You don't need me for the rest of it. And that's just, that's the honest truth of it. That was my script with sellers. I stopped battling the, you need me for marketing. No, they don't. They can do it themselves if they really want. It's an exposure thing. It's a market conditions expertise, but mostly you need me because I know how to get you to a closing table. It's not just about finding a buyer, because you're going to do that by choosing the position of the property. I don't find you your buyer. You actually find your buyer by making the decision that we're going to make right now about listing your property.
And that's when I come back to the most emotional sale on the planet, because it's not getting the people, it's navigating them from the accepted offer to the change of title, because that's when all the emotions come out. And that's when we have to be usually the only adult in the room. Hopefully.
Yeah, oftentimes. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Sure. And there may be other conversations that address that. That was mine. I just told them the truth. Because it seemed to me at some point, why fight the truth? Why would I beat my chest and say, oh, no, my marketing machine is way better than anybody else's, even better than your own? Again, to me, it's not about marketing, it's about exposure. We do have access to a larger exposure platform than you would have on your own typically. And so between that, market expertise to help you make the best decision possible so that the best buyer comes to the table, then it's all about the expertise in getting you to a closing table. Because anyone can list a house. Doesn't take skill to list a house. It takes tons of skill to get a house to actually close. What else?
Well, I don't know if you're ready to go into tactic 8, but
Sure, let's do it.
I really love standing out from the competition, because I remember back in the day, I had to get very creative with agents and helping them. This was right around the time I was an in-house lender working for Weicker and then Ravis. So it was all about creative financing. And this is where I really became more than just an order taker lender. This is when I really started to feel like, oh, wow, there's a lot more to mortgages than just a pretty interest rate. I used to use, in a downward market, I taught my agents how to go after the seller's concessions, because that's where they were like, nope, I want my price. I want my price. I want my price. Okay, well, how is your house going to be different than the 3 other houses on this street with the same layout? So that's when I started teaching my agents about seller concessions, how it benefits the buyer if you offer a seller concession and keep the price up. That's where buy downs started to become a little more popular now, because interest rates were starting to go up a little bit. So we were doing seller buy downs, so you still get your price, but now the seller feels like they got a little something too. So it was really one of my favorite times in the market, believe it or not.
Yeah, I love that. And you know, there's a different version of standing out from the competition. I love that you took it in a different direction, because tactic 8 is really about staging. I'm thinking to myself, how's she going to wrap this around to staging? But I see what you did there, right? So the idea of standing out and assisting sellers in standing out, 100% valid. Let me ask you this: is staging a home important, or does it not matter?
I think it's important.
Yeah.
Or it can
Yeah,
be. Yeah.
I would agree. I think it's crazy important.
The selling point of Birgit Anich, she's the stager #1 nationwide, and I happen to be her friend. She's saying the price that you pay for staging is less than the price that you pay with your first price reduction.
Yeah.
And as they say in the book, it's not a question, do you stage? The question is, how do I stage it?
That is the question. That's worth repeating, right? The question is not about, do I stage? It's not to stage or not stage. It's how am I going to stage, or to what level am I going to stage, right? It's about figuring out who's going to do the staging, right? When I was in the field, that was certainly not me. I wasn't interested in it. I wasn't good at it. So for me, it was always offering a free 1-hour consultation as part of my listing plan with a stager, so that the stager would just go in, spend an hour either doing the stuff, consulting and doing the small stuff. And then if the seller wanted to hire them to do some of the larger stuff, they could certainly do that. But my portion of that was to pay for an hour's staging consult.
Well, I have to tell you, I actually surprised myself because I was helping a client who didn't have the budget for this. And I helped her as much as I could. And actually, we sold it $10,000 above my expectation for selling above asking. It is that important. And when you start giving them examples, I mean, it's a no-brainer at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I love the idea in what else, Kate? I saw you unmuted.
Oh, no, go ahead. I just liked that. I liked that section on 162, just the little thing that you have 30 seconds to make a buyer fall in love with the home, which I think is still true. Sometimes I feel like people are like, oh no, not all those things matter anymore. Maybe some of those things don't matter, but you really do have that. It's a first impression, just like anything else. When you walk up, and if you're not like, I can picture doing things to this even, you know what I mean? It's not going to happen. And so I don't know. I thought that was a good point.
Well, and I agree with that 100%. And I think one of the mistakes people make today is to think that staging and condition somehow don't matter because inventory is still so scarce. You want to drive competition, and you want to drive competition at a high level. Condition and staging way matter, right? Because you still have to have those people want to purchase the house.
Right.
So do the things that make sense to allow for more people to want to say yes faster. And that's all staging is, right? It's all staging is. It's a matter of remember the definition of value, right? Tactic 7 and 8 kind of deal in that. Remember the definition of value? I'll put it in the chat as I say it. It's
Whatever the buyer is willing to pay for the house.
definition of value is more for the same or the same for less, right? More for the same or the same for less. Think about that. More for the same could be more house for the same price. It could be more amenities for the same price, or it could just be the more in that yours looks better than everybody else's because you took the time to stage it, right? That could be the more that pushes you over similarly priced properties, or the same for less, right? Because value means if you're priced the same as everybody else, well, value shows up when you then cost less if you're the same. And the reality is in our neck of the woods, guys, staging, not such a big to do. Like if you were a realtor in California and we were having this conversation, you'd all be like, I don't understand. What is he saying? Why did he ask the question, should we stage? I don't understand what that means. Because in California, it's like you sign the listing agreement and you sign the staging agreement at the same exact moment in time. It's like it's part of the process. In the Northeast, not so much. Right? So we still have this discussion, this choice around it. What else? What else did you hear or read? I love on page 166, towards the end of that last paragraph. Think of it as a price war and a beauty pageant, all rolled up into one. It's a price war and a beauty pageant. And I'm here to tell you that is not just in a downward shifting market. It's in any market. It is a price war and a beauty pageant. It's got to look good. and be competitive. Right? Even if that means it has to look good for what it is. Did you ever hear the phrase, let's slap lipstick on that pig and get it on the market? Right? Because some properties they're just going to be the dogs of the real estate world. That's okay. Slap lipstick on that pig. That's the beauty pageant part of it. And the price war part of it is make sure that it is positioned in a place that people see value in purchasing the pig with the lipstick on. Yes? Price war and beauty pageant. All the time. Think about that. What if you went, I don't necessarily know that I would use that as a script, by the way, with sellers. I think you keep that all in your own little head. And yet, think about that. Think about strategically as you approach your next listing opportunity. Okay, what's the version of this? How do we win the price war? How do we win the beauty contest? Push them together, you got an awesome sale. What else?
Well, this is Kate again. It kind of goes back to tactic 7 a little bit and tactic 8 with this. I liked that seller script that was in tactic 7, sorry, where they talked about, yes, maybe this sold for more last year, but if we wait again, it could sell for less next year. And I think it's kind of using that doubt for all of these things, like whether it be the staging. Well, listen, we don't have, you don't have to stage, but do you want to do this now? Or do you want, what could be the outcome of not doing it later? Like it's kind of always creating that doubt. You want to plant that seed of doubt that their plan or whatever, maybe they thought, if it's not in line kind of with what is best for them, that you can kind of just plant that little bit of doubt because you really want the best for them. You want them to get the best bang for their buck. And if they need to get out, you want them to be able to sell it quickly and not sit on something for so long. I thought that kind of like rolled into a lot of these things, that phrasing that was in that tactic, but.
Yeah, 100%. And it goes right back, Kate, to if you flip backwards to 152, right? Mm-hmm. This tale of two markets, for those of you who were in business, at least with me, back in 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, right? The tale of two markets. I mean, we use that all the time. It was a major discussion point. And if you look at page 152, as things start to tighten, there are all those little properties that are in the market right down that little tiny corner in terms of price and condition. And most of the things are out of the market.
Yeah.
Right. The page before might be a valid one for today, right? Because it's hard to have a property come to the market that doesn't attract attention just because of the difference between the supply and demand right now. Mm-hmm. And yet, even in a market where most things are in the market, there is that band in a seller's market, even in an extreme seller's market, of things that are out of the market.
Right.
Right. I don't know about you guys, but I still watch the MLS every day, and it's not like nothing expires. There are properties that do not sell and come off the market. That band of things being out of the market is still real. And that line between the two has everything to do with the positioning in the market.
Yeah.
What else? Anybody game for tactic 9? I love me some tactic 9. My goodness. Because it's all about urgency.
I just think, experiencing this market today, there will always be excuses for people not to go out and buy. Right? There's always something.
And there'll be excuses from people on the seller side not to sell. And there'll be excuses from real estate agents why they can't put transactions together. Why their productivity is off, down, or non-existent, right? And to me, that's kind of why I love tactic number 9. It's because tactic number 9 was like 10 pages or so that said the same 3 words over and over again. Figure it. Just figure it out. Right? There's a path forward. Homes are selling. Figure it out. They may not be selling the way you want them to be selling, but whoever made you that promise? Let me ask this: anyone in the room over 18? Yeah, I thought so. And so, anybody ever have at least one day of your life not go exactly the way you thought it was going to go or supposed to go? Or, I mean, some of the conversations that we have with buyers and sellers, some of the conversations we have in our own heads, when you really take them out and look at them and examine them, you think to yourself, what are we talking about? Right? Sometimes there's a level of entitlement or a level of expectation that I'm just not sure where it comes from. Right? Buyers aren't entitled to a great deal. Sellers aren't entitled to get to make money on their property or make what they want to make on their property. Agents aren't entitled to putting transactions together. Like, none of us has an entitlement. You got to work for it and figure it out. What do the market conditions today say about what my opportunity is? And then how do I go and maximize the opportunity? Right? Because there's opportunity in every single market. What else?
You know, once again, the opportunity to systematize the business, you know, it was obvious, and I've heard it before, on page 174, buyer urgency, able, ready, and willing. And I was talking to a woman on the phone this morning who said, you know, I know the market is hot and I've got places that I could go. And I know I could get a good, you know, a pretty penny for my property, but my daughter's in the area, you know, and I can't, you know, we can't make people ready. You know, that's the one thing, unless there's something I don't know, you know, but if we pay attention to the other two and we educate, we can be there when they are ready, because hopefully we've developed some sort of a relationship with them. But again, you know, I've learned the hard way that for as much as I'd like to think that I've got a good line with people and I know how to engage, you know, we have a system for everything in our lives. And, you know, we are the conscious of it or not conscious of it. And our ability to systematize as much as possible in this line of work and sort of put it in our hard drive will be better out in the field. So that was a big one for me.
I think it was on the shift call when they were talking about this section. They talked about, you have to ask yourself, when you're dealing with a listing client, are you dealing with a listing client, or are you when you're trying to determine their level of motivation, are they someone who needs to sell, or are they someone who needs to buy? And then, you know, they were saying in the call that they gave this example of the person who wanted a specific house in a specific neighborhood. So they decided that this person was a buyer, so they had to find them their right house first and then list. And then there was another strategy where they had to sell. So they sold their house and then they looked for another house. So it was very interesting that each listing, and both listings, but had a different motivation to determine their level of urgency.
Yeah. And remember, Gary told us back in tactic 4, you can't motivate people. That's not within your power. That's where Tony was going, I think, right? You can't motivate people. You can motivate them. You can aid them along the path by asking great questions to help them come to decisions about their own unique circumstances. And to Tammy's point, you know, in that example, someone's unique circumstances just changed completely, that they did things exactly the opposite. But it's a matter of asking. It goes right to page 176 in the middle. Make your buyer pre-qualification and consultation time count. Right? Because if you don't understand what's driving a buyer or a seller, then you just don't understand. right? To me, if you're not really careful about having really powerful consultations, right? If I'm talking with Silva as my buyer, if I'm talking with Bogdan as my seller, if I'm sitting down with Silva as my buyer and I haven't gone through a consultation, the entire rest of the search might as well be her speaking in Bulgarian and me speaking in English. Now, she would understand me, but I wouldn't know what she was saying. If I was sitting down with Bogdan as my seller and all he did was speak Romanian to me, well, he would understand what I was saying to him because he knows both. I don't know a word in either Bulgarian or Romanian, right? And so I have no information then, and yet I keep giving them all the English. They're nodding their heads, but they're in their back of my mind. They're thinking, okay, he's not listening to a word I'm saying because he just keeps speaking the same thing over and over again. He hasn't listened to nuance. He hasn't asked me questions. We're not getting anywhere, right? It's the same idea of not having one of those a valid conversation and really asking those powerful questions. You might as well be speaking a different language.
I was going to say, like on page 185, when he talks about that story of telling the couple going through their wants list and needs, like he whipped out the paper to remind them what they said they wanted and needed so that they would buy this house because he was sensing their reluctance. I thought that part was, really interesting because even in my own experiences, I have one now, but buyers who I feel like we've had the conversation, we're on the same page, we have our wants and needs, we've talked about the timeline and what needs to happen and when. And then as we're going, the different feedback I'm getting is getting broader and broader. Well, I'm open to any style of house. I don't really want a specific style of house, or instead of, this, well, I was thinking it might be nice to have solar panels, like out of left field. I'm like, I almost like my head turns around. I'm like, I'm so sorry. Wait, we've seen a lot and but that was the first time I've ever heard that. So it's, one of those things where and I want to make sure I'm doing it correctly for her. I want to help her find what she's looking for, but I am having a very hard time kind of narrowing in on what that really is, and she talks about, and then they kind of keep shifting a little bit. So I think that part that is so helpful to me, but then I'm struggling with trying to find those internal motivations to figure out, okay, maybe is there some reluctance here that I'm not picking up on? Is there something that she's not sure about? Is it, that's hard. I'm having a hard time with that, I guess.
Sure. Well, so here's I have a couple of thoughts on that. And so first thought is, like if you're using your top 5 must-have list and you've done a valid consult to help people understand what it is they're looking for, and you're there standing in the house kind of checking the boxes saying, and you use that script. So you know what, Mr. Tom and Maria, my goodness, I am so excited. This house seems to meet all of your criteria. I'm curious, is this a house that you are interested in making an offer on? And they say, well, maybe, except it doesn't have the solar panels. I'm sorry, what? Right. And so the solar panels. Got it. So I'm curious, is this a house that you believe that meets all of your other criteria? Because if you notice, solar panels weren't on the top 5 must-have list. Is that something you think you want to put on the top 5 must-have list? And if so, which of the 5 that you decided on are you removing? Because remember, there's no such thing as a 100% house.
Right.
So if solar panels now is going to go on there, well, then something else has to come off. Oftentimes I find when people throw out those kind of randomy things,
yeah,
your intuition is right. There is something else going on, but you have to solve you don't get to have everything you want issue first. And so reminding them that they have to take something off if they put solar panels on is where I would start. The second thing is helping them understand that some of those things they throw out there, you can put solar panels on any house. Right? If they're frankly, you don't want to necessarily buy a house with solar panels in place. You want to do the research, hire the company that you're going to find to get that all working the way you want it for your budget, your whatever. Right? And inheriting solar panels, I can tell, just from experience, I have found to be less than ideal in a lot of different scenarios. So in that specific instance, Kate, solar panels, yay, good, nothing on there. If you want them, I have some resources I can put you in touch with.
Yeah, okay,
Oh, by the way, one of your colleagues, Norberto Rodriguez, also runs and owns a solar panel company. So if you ever have somebody who wants information on solar panels, connect with Norberto, because
Okay.
he's your solar panel guy.
I'll check.
Mostly though, Kate, where I think you have to go to is to ask the question.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, oftentimes when I find that people, when clients all of a sudden have an additional really important want after our top 5 must-have list, I find that it maybe isn't really about that want. I'm curious, is there a reason you're reluctant to pull the trigger on this particular property? I would just ask it.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to figure it out, like, by osmosis or
Yes.
however else,
Mhm.
I just ask the question. Hey, I'm
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah, and I didn't do that. So that is helpful, just more direct.
Yeah. Yeah. And because I think that people actually, regardless of how it might feel, again, to some of you, you're sitting there thinking, yeah, why wouldn't you just do that all the time? Why wouldn't you just ask the question? And the answer is because for 50 or 70% of you on this call, that level of direct with clients is a practiced skill. It's not a natural skill, right? Even if you're natural that way with yourself or with your spouse or in other circumstances, sometimes in a customer service or a client relationship, it doesn't feel like that level of direct works. And I can tell you from experience, I have the opposite angle. I have to always remember to like tamp it down a little bit and be a little smilier. But the idea of just asking specific questions, it helps cut through all the whatever that might be going on, and then they answer the questions. And sometimes they say, you know what, you're right. I don't know why, So I was watching late night TV last night, and there was an infomercial on solar panels, and so they're just in my head. And you're 100% right. Let me get that, put that in my back pocket. Let's focus on what's really important.
Okay.
Or you uncover, well, you know what? It's not really about the solar panels. I'm just not sure about the 3 bedrooms. I'm starting to really be concerned that we may have more children, and so a 4th bedroom might really be important to me. And well, great. I'm glad we uncovered that. Let's sit down and have a conversation around that.
Yeah.
What are your options? Your options are to buy 3 bedrooms now and then trade up a little later. What does that look like? Your options are to spend a little more and buy the 4th bedroom now. But you get to have a conversation around it.
Yeah.
I
Does that
have
help?
a few clients.
Yes, a lot. Thank you.
Silva, what else?
I have a few clients who don't want to participate in competition, and when they hear about 24 deals on the table, they're like hopeless, and they just give up.
Yeah, well, so we're going to talk a lot about this tomorrow at 11 o'clock. This is not the market for all buyers. It's just not. And I'll go back to what I said before. The reason that we're unwilling to help people step back from this market and only engage with people who are willing to play at that level so that we have more and more successes is a lead generation issue. Right? It goes back to our pipelines aren't full enough with motivated people who are willing to play by the strategies and rules in today's market that allow you to win. Because think about it. If in the example I gave last week on the 9 o'clock call, with 25 offers, only 7 or 8 of them were actually ever in consideration. Everybody else was like, okay, thanks, but no. So did they have 25 offers? Not really. They had 7 or 8. Now, 7 or 8 is still a lot in most like normal markets. In this market, it's, you hear things like 7 or 8 offers, like, oh, really? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with the house? What's wrong? What happened? Only 7 or 8. But I want you to think about it. We're contributing to our own issues by not taking a stand with buyers who are not willing to step up to the plate. Because conversations with sellers and then other buyers when there's only 7 offers versus 25 has people think differently. sellers have different expectations about what the offer should be. And it stops driving that spiral out of control of upward appreciation. Buyers understand that they have a chance if they play their cards right and they're one of the 7. 25 starts to sound ridiculous. So by not taking a stand with a lot of these buyers, we're contributing to our own issues. We're contributing to the problem. We're not actually helping solve the problem. And again, so it turns into, are we being really clear with our buyers about what it takes to win? And are we being clear with them about numbers? If you have to pay 20% over an asking price to win a house, well, guess what? If you can afford $500,000, you need to be looking in the 4 to 425 range to be able to bid 20% over and still win. If you can afford $500,000 and you're looking in the $500,000 range, it's no wonder you're not finding property, because you got to pay $600,000 to win. Anyway, more on that tomorrow. More on my sermon on the Mount tomorrow on that, because we have a whole lot to talk about.
I sent you a text out of inspiration. I had a situation last week, so I just sent you a text with the presentation that I did to help my clients. And if you give me like 2 extra minutes tomorrow on Tammy Tuesday, I'll be able to tell the whole story. But right to your point, I mean, like, it's a softball.
Yeah, great. Well, you know what I would encourage? I would encourage you come to 11 o'clock, and I'll watch that, and maybe you can kick off the 11 o'clock with some of that. All right, guys, it is 12:01. I hope this was
Thank you.
helpful. Hey, so for next week, I got 2 things for you. Next week, we're going to just finish the book. So just go to the end, right? It's tactics 9, it's tactics 10, 11, and 12, and then whatever the last bit is, right? So let's just finish the book for next week. And 2 weeks from today, we start in Wealth Can't Wait by Paul Morris and David. Oh God, why can't I think of his name? By Paul Morris and his friend David. So if you want to get started on that, I don't have the exact pages yet.
David Osborne. Here
David
is the
Osborne,
book.
thank you very much. Thank you very much, David Osborne. All right. So that's what we're doing. All right, guys, have a great one. We'll see you at 1 or at 2 or later or tomorrow or whenever. See you later.
Thank you. Bye.